16th meeting of the Water and Wastewater Commission. I'll now call the meeting to order. Let's see, be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. If anybody in the audience is recording this meeting, they identify themselves? No. At this point, I'll ask all electronic devices be put into silent mode. And since nobody in the audience looking, I don't believe we have a public forum this evening. Okay, so we didn't send out the minutes, did we?
No minutes this week. We'll do them next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the Water Division. John Devine.
Yeah, nobody here for the public forum?
Nope.
So we have I have a revised, as Mark does too, I'll let him speak to his, but a revised budget. I had some minor tweaks based on some information from the mayor and city auditor as far as the indirect cost that the Water Division pays to the city. Basically, they said to account for a 3% increase in those for this coming fiscal year, FY26. So I added the 3% on to those line items. And add just a little bit more, round it up, to an even 10,000 or something like that. So it ends up being a little bit more. And the other adjustment that was made was summer help. We're going to try to get a few employees for the summer season, hopefully to help paint some hydrants if we're successful in hiring them. So I increased that from 10,000 to 35,000 in strong hopes of being able to hire for people for June, July, and August. Otherwise, those are the changes. One thing that's a bit odd with this year's budget, and I'm not sure if we touched upon it at the last meeting, but the liens were not applied in this fiscal year. The treasurer was not able to complete the lien process for the water and sewer bills. And generally, we get around $400,000 or a little bit more in revenue due to liens, past due bills. So I've lowered that significantly, but then show almost double that amount for next fiscal year, assuming that, everything will go through the correct lien process for next year. What ends up happening is that if we don't, we end up in the red this fiscal year. That money would come out of our retained earnings to balance the budget, and then anticipating that we get twice as much to make up for next year, that would go back into retained earnings at the end of FY26 to do that. So there's kind of a little switcheroo per se with the monies. We're not going to lose any money. It's just going to take longer to have that come into our into the city and into our accounts in the respective line items, and of course back into the retained earnings if they are taken out. What I am seeing right now presently is with the last status or budget report ending on March, is that our water rate revenue is up a little bit higher than projected, about 6.1%. So that might cover some of the lien revenue that we aren't getting. So we may not have the money come out of retained earnings, which would be a plus because we really need to build that up a bit more. So so hopefully that trend continues and we do cover that that loss of revenue for this fiscal year. And of course, like I said, it'll be into next fiscal year. So having said that, that's kind of an overview. There's not much changes otherwise to the budget. I mean, we have some increases in electricity we got to cover, a little increase in chemicals, nothing, startling. We have some contracts with employees that haven't been renewed, so we might have some money in next fiscal year that we have to account for that once new CBAs are negotiated and signed. But the standard practice has been just to leave the pays as they are until we know that, rather than put any type of buffer or anything like that in. So we do have a rate increase coming up June 1st, 12%, so, and then next year it falls down to 5% for a couple of years. So that's kind of shown in the increase in water rate revenue. We're a bit conservative with the water rate revenue too, so you know, our budgeting is based on a little bit lower than what, you know, what we project, you know, completely. So because we want to, you know, be too positive about things. And that maybe reflected a little bit in my revenue being up 6.1% because we, you know, didn't quite, you know, figure that, you know, that higher amount. So feels like it's good to be conservative and just kind of cover these numbers, you know, whether it's, you know, your electricity expenses, your chemical expenses, or any of your revenue line items that, you know, conserve in the right direction so that in the end you're not in the red. So we will have a bit more for capital improvement next year, which will be a plus in that line item, about $750,000 with that rate increase, and that was what was planned, so we can do some of the smaller water main projects, you know, dead-end streets. I think I'd mentioned that before, and things like that that we can fit in under our existing contracts without having to go out to bid for a larger job. So if we have a 2-inch line that gets a, you know, it's notorious, those 2-inch iron pipe line mains. I call them a main because they're supplying several houses, but they're only 2-inch. But once you get a leak in one spot or something fails, you touch it, it keeps going. And so you're better off just replacing the 200, 300, 400 feet of it and just be done with it because it's just going to be problematic in the future once you've disturbed it for that one repair. So those are the types of things we'd like to do under that work. Another example is some paving projects. We see where there's some work that needs to be done on Airport Road before it's paved, about $100,000 down there just to kind of clean up some intersection where there's some, you know, main that should be abandoned. We can't do the whole street, it's too much, but we like to clean up things that we identify as a potential for a leak or a break. So having said that, I mean, we can go through each of the categories. The first grouping just below the summary at the top is the revenue categories. And like I said, there's no significant difference besides the increase in rates for next year. So I mean, I don't think we probably want to go through them line by line, but if there's any, I could point out as we go along if there's something significant like I just did, but if there's any questions that somebody thought of, just please let me know. And having said that, just backing up one bit, we're not going to ask for a vote for tonight. We're going to let everything settle out with the city's budget and ask for a vote in May, so there's still time. So
I think, John, we've had a chance to review it before, but I think if you can point out any of the high points, anything that's significant beyond that, if anybody's got questions, of course, we'll. Yes.
Just a comment as we go. First one is a question. Maybe if you could just address what we have in our rainy day fund from both departments at some point.
Yep.
And maybe as you kind of go through it, whatever numbers have quite a bit of a change, maybe you could just speak to those.
Yeah, most the ones that I did, I pointed out. Otherwise, there isn't anything. So, but I can, as I go through, I'll see if there's anything I find or whatever. But we have, I think, like $400-something thousand in retained earnings right now. So it's not a lot of money. We'd like to be at $1 million. So.
Are there any measures we can take in the budget to try to increase that? Any cost savings?
No, I mean, it was projected to kind of dip down and then go back up in the rate study. So with the future, increases that, we will be seeing that replenished. We would have been, if it wasn't for the issue with the liens, we probably, would be even this year and then next year put in some money. So, I mean, it will slowly creep back up. I mean, we don't want to try to do it all at once. So the goal is that, within the next couple of years, we'll be at $1 million. Okay.
I mean, I just see, based on your budget, 400,000 is a pretty small number.
Yeah, no, that's why I like to be at, say $1 million too, we have borrowing capacity if something, catastrophic does. I mean, you don't really want to have, too much in retained earnings. I mean, yeah, you're getting some interest on it, but at the same time, it's like it's artificially elevating the water rates. So you want something for an emergency, but not too excessive, so.
Well,
Generally around 10%.
while we're talking about money, can you explain to me how and what happens when a person doesn't pay their water bill? I understand that, well, you tell me, because I'm new at this, and I just don't.
Yeah, they always have a 14% interest charge on it, so we're always gaining interest. In past, we actually get probably $600,000-$700,000 in additional revenue and interest, and
When do we get that?
usually when they're leaned,
So everybody that didn't pay last year
Yeah, and the
has a
lien,
lien on their property this year. It's already done.
they didn't do it this year, the
They
treasurer.
didn't do it this year?
Yeah, no.
Why didn't they do it?
They had an issue, the new treasurer had an issue with the Munis system, so.
So how much money didn't get liened?
For us, it was 400,000, 450,000, so.
But it will still get leaned.
That will still get leaned, but it won't be until this
Yeah, but
fall.
with a year's interest.
Yeah.
No, we're gaining,
No, they're going to get interest charge right along, so.
we're gaining 14%.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
When it's not paid, it's 14% interest
Yeah.
that the city receives.
It's always good to say, hey, listen, we're getting 14% interest, but that's money that we could be using. There's money that we could be paying. Like, I noticed that the cost of living is 2.4%. Now, I base most of my ideas on the military because that's where I was born and I grew up and I started to learn about the world. We get 2.5% across the board. I see 5%, 7% in some of these. But we don't have the same pension program that these guys have. The military has 50% for 20 years, and they don't have that anymore because the federal government said that they can't do that anymore. Now military people have to support their own 401k, and we're given an 80% pension here. I'm just saying that we could probably save some money if we, looked at these things, and not that these guys don't deserve 100 times more than they
Yeah,
get.
you'd find the vast majority of people don't get 80% pensions.
I don't hear you.
You'd find the vast majority of the employees don't get 80%, so, yeah.
I thought the city pension program was 80% after so many years.
No.
You have to spend, you have to be over probably mid-60s with about 35, 36 years in
Yeah,
order to get the full 80.
yeah.
So most
It's
of
on
them
their base pay too, so,
I think the average is around 40, between 40 and 50.
yeah. It's under 50% is the average, so.
And that's something that is, those are by the union.
Yeah, and state
Negotiation.
law.
That's not something
Yeah,
we're
state
negotiating.
retirement.
It's what the negotiating.
Oh, but we negotiate the pay raise.
I think that's negotiated with the
The
union.
mayor the mayor negotiates with the union through us.
If we don't approve this, the only thing that this board does is supposed to be fiscally responsible. We're supposed to look at this. We have no say about anything else that goes on. All we're doing is looking at the money. Or maybe I'm wrong at that. But that's what.
I don't think you're wrong, but my sense is what we're talking about, when we're talking about salaries, that is negotiated outside of this group.
Yeah.
Outside of this group.
Yeah.
And what are we
for
here for?
educational purposes, is that everybody, all the department
All the departments.
employees,
Yeah.
Yeah.
from management all the way down?
Right. All the salaries that are contained in this budget are contractual, with the exception of essentially the department or division heads. So myself, John, Mark, and I'm fairly certain that's it. So if like, let's say hypothetically, this board wanted to vote to reduce the labor expenses, I don't think that would really carry through, because the city's contractually obligated to pay those employees anyways through their union labor contracts.
There'd be a big trouble, big problem with the union attorneys and everything, and we'd have to take it from someplace else in the budget and cover those costs.
Right.
Okay, then what is our purpose?
To look at everything all together,
And what? If we have no say,
Oh, you can look at a line item and tell me you'd like to see that cut or, propose that. Like I said, that's one that's out, that's one line item that you could do, but I just don't think it would have any weight.
What we're looking at is we're looking at the budget. Now, if we see something that's out of line, we have to ask them to explain it.
Yep.
And in the event that we feel his explanation isn't good, at that point, we could be making a motion to reduce it. So it's a question of, our job here is to question the budget that John's presenting to us. If there's items on here, now again, the salaries aren't one we can control, but for example,
Can I ask about?
Yes.
One new guy question. What are the paging stipends?
It's kind of an old term, but it's for people that are on call. For distribution, we have 2 people on call, a primary and a secondary pager. That's what we call them because that's always the way it's been. But they'll carry a cell phone and get called. So that stipend is for them to be around through the week and be ready to go at any time, 24/7. So, they can't really travel too far from their homes or, consume any alcoholic beverages or anything like that. They need to be ready to go within, they need to report within 20 minutes. So when somebody, for example, somebody's calls and their service line let go in their basement, it's flooding their basement, so they'll call our emergency line. Those guys are, ready to respond to that as quickly as possible. Or a water main break that, takes out half a street or floods buildings. They're the first ones to respond, those people on there. And then we also have one additional in treatment that's on a rotating list too with the other employees that's on call. So we don't have 2 in treatment. We have 1 person in treatment, 2 in distribution. And those 3 people, which rotates throughout the year, not any specific ones, are comprised those paging stipends. So.
And when they go out, they get time and a half?
Yep. Double time on a holiday or a Sunday. So.
A minimum type?
4 hours, yeah.
Yeah, automatically 4 hours, whether it's 15 minutes or 5 hours or whatever?
Correct.
If it's 5 hours, they get...
And they get the additional time, yeah. But if within that 4 hours, they get called again, which happens sometimes in the winter months with freeze-ups and stuff, then that's covered within that, so.
and again, those are negotiated contract.
Yep.
Question? And I apologize if I missed because I was a couple minutes late. I see the lien for last year was almost nil. That was because of the glitch?
That's because of the glitch.
And now it's double what it was
double
the
for the next
previous year?
Yes.
Could you just explain that?
So that those liens that weren't placed, the liens that
They're still there, those
They're still
unpaid
there.
bills, except they haven't gone on to the real estate lien.
Okay,
And when you lien the real estate, typically, if there's a mortgage on the property, the mortgage company pays the lien.
Yeah.
We get the money, and they go off to the homeowner.
Right.
So if we don't lien it, we don't get the money, but the bill is still there, and the bill is still accumulating at 14%.
I get that. Okay, a little unclear why this year it doubled.
So in
We're
FY
going to
20,
make up for last year. Last year, the 400,000 we didn't get last year, we're going to get next year, and we're going to get next year's 400,000.
Okay, so we're going to lean previous year, and
Yes.
then we got to lean this year.
Yes.
So we're going to have 2 years of liens in
Sorry to do-
one thing.
Okay.
But just to be clear, even though it wasn't liened, they're all accumulating interest. There's no gap or anything. We're not losing anything there, so.
yeah, so if you see FY 25, $20,000 under the water liens, that's representative of this year
Missed it.
because we missed it.
Yeah.
If you go back to FY 24, you see the numbers 412, 526.
Average is 4.
That's an average.
Yeah.
So then you double it for the next year because we'll be leaning this year's plus next year's
Yeah,
liens.
get that.
And then that gets you the 820.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, just one other question, maybe for next meeting. Several years back, we went to monthly billing to help ease customers with payments, right? Because they're
Yep.
quarterly billing. And I think we were getting in the rears with people paying, right? Have we seen a demonstrable change when we went to are we seeing a better stream of revenue?
I think we are, because even though there's been rate increases, it hasn't gone up significantly, the lien amounts, but there's going to be a group of people that don't pay regardless because their mortgage company's pulling it out every month, just as they do for, say, their real estate taxes. So somebody goes through the course of the year, they don't pay their monthly water and sewer bill because they know, along with their real estate taxes, they're going to get paid later in the year. So they just do that. I mean, of course, they cost them more because of the 14% interest, but they may not be able to, because the mortgage company's pulling it out, and they can't stop the mortgage company from doing that because they may have missed payments in the past. Once that vicious cycle starts, it's hard to get out of it, I think. So,
Interesting. Thank you.
yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think that 14% just recently was reduced to 8%, I want to say.
No, I think that's still 14. It has to do with the real estate when you pull.
Is it just real
when
estate?
the city takes a property for non-payment of taxes. So
That's what it is, okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's and there's an 8% in there, like how much they were able to get over something. So,
Okay.
But as far as our part is concerned, the utility bills, it still remains at 14%.
Another question?
Yeah, just real quick, is there a target date for when the liens will be updated?
Yeah, it's not state law. We can't put them on like the estimated bills coming in June for next year. They have to be done in December for January. So that's the only time they can do it, because we thought maybe we could do that. We're still looking at the option of perhaps sending out demand bills to try to force people to pay a bit, but I'm not sure. We're working on it. We're seeing, that option. So I just, it may not be super successful because it isn't a lien, and it may not be noticed by the mortgage company that pays the real estate taxes.
So, John, what you're saying, these liens will not go on until December?
December, yeah. So they're going to get 2 years of liens at once, so, which is not desirable, of course, but because that window was missed, so. Yeah, we would have liked to have just done them again or next month, but then we found, we were told by the treasurer, and then, reviewing state law, it's like it can't be done that way. It has to go on at a certain period. So,
Thank you.
Unfortunately.
And just real quick, back to Commissioner Burns' comment on, what are we all doing here, the salaries and all that. I suppose the only salaries that could be discussed in this setting would be the deputy commissioners, John's and Mark's. I would strongly recommend not cutting those salaries, because I think you're getting a bargain in the two individuals that are sitting in front of you right now, with the amount of work that they deal with, the amount of stress they handle on a daily basis, and it's not a.
Oh, I didn't even think that they don't deserve what they're going to get. I didn't even mean that. That's what I said initially. That, I was just figuring out where we're going with this.
Yeah, I just want to make it known that those two individuals deserve every single penny that they earn.
They lead the whole parade, so, I understand that.
Okay.
On here, subtotal of reimbursement to the city, we have, this year, we're going to be paying $50,000 more. Why?
Which one is that?
Underwater, first page, reimbursement to the subtotal reimbursement to the city is $1,000,004, and this year it's $1,000,006, and that's an uptick of 50 grand. I was just wondering why.
The reimbursements, the fringe benefits and the.
That was the thing you tweaked on this, correct?
I'm sorry, what?
I think that's the cost.
To me, it's 4.
It's first page under the summary section, John.
Oh, okay. I'm
Subtotal
looking down below. Yeah, the summaries.
Yeah.
Subtotal
Yeah, that's-
reimbursement to the city.
That's the increase, the 1.41 to 1.46. That's the increase in like health insurance and things like that, and just general insurance. There's a whole gamut of things, and I'm hoping by the next meeting we'll have that broken down. I had an old version I could have brought, but the city auditor is going to bring that. And that's basically the indirect costs that we pay to the city. We pay part of the mayor's salary, very small percent. We pay a portion of the treasurer's because they take the bills and payments. That's all covered in there. All my employees' health insurance, it isn't paid separately, it's paid through that. can't think what else, there was a bunch of things on there.
Solicitor, I think you
Yeah,
actually pay a portion of my salary as commissioner.
Yeah.
And there's some other indirect costs that are charged through that line item.
Yeah.
And that's all broken down by the city auditor, and those numbers are presented to the enterprise funds, and we're required to pay that amount every year to the city.
And just to add to that, the water department and the wastewater, we serve all the city buildings, but there's no charges on any of those. So they look at those each year too, to look how much water, the total was for city buildings, and then wastewater
It's
separate.
nice to have it rolled up like that into 14.6, but I'd like to have that rolled out, to know how much is health insurance and how much is
Yeah, we'll,
workers' comp insurance and how much is all the other things that are actually considered added onto a salary.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to be able to see that.
but we're waiting, she told us to increase that by 3%, the city auditor, and that's where I went a little bit more, rounded up, to 10,000, but they're supposed to give us a new breakdown.
But I'd like to have a breakdown of what it is, so
Yep,
that,
yep.
I can get a visualize of
Yep.
what's going on.
Yeah, and it breaks down a little bit more, just in a couple line items further into the budget, but the real breakdown is what the city auditor provides, and which we were waiting for, and that's why she just said take last year and add 3%, so that's what we follow that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. But like I said, when they look at that number, they also look at how much water was used by all the city buildings or schools and everything else all together. And they figure that in with those indirect costs. So, we do get some credit for that as well. So to make it a true enterprise fund. So, I mean, with enterprise, we're not supposed to subsidize the city, and they're not supposed to subsidize us. It's supposed to be completely even. So, and Mark and I I can attest that we give pushback on those indirect costs. We want to make sure that, there's a proper accounting of them too, and we'll bring that sheet once the city auditor has prepared that for us, with the final totals.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Another question?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. Page 3, and this was probably explained last year. Watershed maintenance is at 100,000. Maybe you could just tell us a little about the
Yep.
requirements of that.
That was increased in order to start doing some of the work on the dams, just engineering and trying to acquire grants. We're trying to get, a number of grants for some of the works in the dams, and without some type of money for that, we wouldn't be able to even apply. So we have to pay engineering firms for some studies or applications or things like that. In addition, we also want to do some small work that needs to be done. The Water Division is responsible for 16 dams altogether, and I would say we probably need, probably $70 to $100 million to bring those into good condition. So just to put it in perspective, we have one out in Hubbardston on the Hubbardston-Princeton line, Bickford Reservoir. That has a drop inlet spillway, I call it a morning glory, and then basically a culvert pipe that goes through the dam. Cool design back in the 60s, but guess what? It is going to be an issue, and just the repair or replacement of that is $5 million just for that small portion of it. So because it's just so difficult, making, do you fix that, or do you make it a normal spillway where cascades down a series of drops or through riprap or something like that? Because right now that was cast in a number of seams, and all those seams have been leaking. We've made repairs, but the concrete's starting to break down over age, as it does, especially when it's exposed to water and ice, throughout the year. So that's just an example of, realistically, our budget's going to be $8.8 million for, proposed for next year. And I would say if we were to try to get everything up to pretty good condition, from the water mains to the plants to the dams, you're probably looking at $250 to $300 million, at least $250 million. So when we look at this budget, we're doing the minimum. We're doing what we have to do to meet the regulations, which costs us a lot of money. make sure the water's treated properly, but not really doing as much water main work as we'd like, or, the dams until it's gets to a point where, we're putting out a fire. So, we recognize that, the city isn't a wealthy city. I mean, when we look at the rate studies, we can't, if we tried to fully fund all this stuff, it would bankrupt the city, it would bankrupt the people, so this is, a minimalistic budget to basically meet the regulations to make sure that at least people have clean water most of the time. We have water main breaks, we have, some dead ends that cause issues, and we try to tackle those, but just want to, put that into perspective. So we have 200 miles of water main, and I'd say, over half of it should be replaced, but keeps moving all the time, as long as the water's moving through it, even though it looks pretty ugly inside, it's clean, so it's amazing, but at some point it's going to get so tuberculated and plugged up that it needs to be done. So we always want to do more, but every time we turn around, there's new regulations, or, the treatment plant, which I'll talk about later, the regional plant's 30 years old, the other one's going to be 20 years old, things are just wearing out, keep it up the best we can, but sooner or later it gets to a major, major rehab, so.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Sorry to be so positive.
Hey, you're giving us the facts, that's.
Yeah,
No?
it's sad when you think of it. It really brings me down. Because I wish I could do everything for everybody and get everybody's water mains fixed, but it's not realistic, we were putting out fires all over the place. We know there's some stretches here and there that we need to do, but only, I got on one street that's, I think it's 1,340 feet that really needs to be replaced, but it's $200 a foot to do it, by the time you replace the main and do everything. So now you're at 300,000, I think it was 200, whatever, 280, 300,000 by the time you're said and done. That's a lot of money for 1,300 feet. A quarter mile when we have 100 something miles, but those type of things, those people are having water quality issues. We flushed it, we've done whatever we could, but it's to the point where it just has to be done because now the water just doesn't, it just stays stagnant there. It's a hydraulic restriction and just doesn't move through there anymore. So I'm actually excited to have the 700,000, with the rate, because we'd hope to have that and, be able to do some of these things, so at least pick at some of this that's the worst streets for people. So that's part of the rate study to do some of this, is like to include some of these things. We can't wave the wand and, raise the rates and just fix everything within 5 years. It's not going to happen, but at least if we have enough to, pick at these every year and, in addition to all the work we're doing on Main Street, which is a big job too, but needs to be done because we want to do Main Street over, but it's not something that's going to greatly improve everybody's water quality because, the water moves through here all the time because they're larger mains, but. Anything else on we'll go to the next page, but that was the revenue side of items. Like I said, there wasn't anything of significance really besides the rate increase and the issue with the liens. So, all right. The second page are all the breakdown of all the basically employee payroll, paging stipends as was discussed, overtime, clothing allowances that as part of the contractual agreements. And people retire, they're able to sell back their sick days or get an amount for that. And we have at least one retirement coming up. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything significant in there. We had some larger increases in, because we had to raise the pays to actually fill positions, and it's been very good. We've been able to get stability in those positions and keep them filled. So we have a couple vacant positions now, but we anticipate filling them in the next couple months. So, all right. Third page is a bunch of miscellaneous expenses. Basically, we account for the regional plant because we share that with Westminster and share the costs in there, and that's based on the amount of gallons that they receive from the plant. But all these other costs cover other things. So you're going to see, for example, this one, a repair and maintenance of buildings. That's all the other buildings that we have, pump stations and the Falulah plant, things that Westminster doesn't cover. So it's broken out into here. So we've been doing quite a few roof replacements, so it was a little bit higher in past years. We kind of settled down a little bit, but I don't think there's any other major thing besides just creep up with, increased postage for mailing bills. That's the major difference there. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions at all?
Any questions? Any more questions?
All right, the fourth page, you'll see the top grouping is the regional treatment plants expenses. We do not break out chemicals between the plants. It's just not feasible trying to track all that stuff, and that's figured in for the spreadsheet that we use to calculate Westminster's shared costs. Electricity's creeped up. Repair maintenance of buildings, covers anything, the regional plant boiler, HVAC, anything that needs to be repaired there. The next one, and this is Joe, this is the little bit of a breakdown. We'll give you the whole spreadsheet for prior to the next meeting so you see it, but for the reimbursements to the city for fringe benefits and other city costs. Not sure why they call it fringe benefits, but miscellaneous benefits would probably be better. Reimbursement for city costs, that covers all the department costs. Like I said, that would include the treasurer's office, the portion we pay there. We pay like 2% of the mayor's salary, 3% of the auditor's salary, things like that, that add up, so. And the fringe benefits would be the health insurance, the retirees that we have that are receiving benefits. Can't remember what else, but.
Sorry. Yep. Will we have some cost for land purchase based on the last meeting? Wasn't there some land we were gonna?
Yeah, one of them fell through, but we're going after another piece of land. So I would come to you before you with that separately once we, got further along. So, but we had one purchase that a conservation restriction that we tried to do a couple of years ago, but the owner backed out of it. We are working on another, which was like at the last meeting, but I would bring that to you separately. We applied for a grant, and we'd see once we got the grant and try to work something out with the owner, then I'd bring that back once,
So is that the one up near the Ashburnham area?
Yeah, it's 40-something acres up there. What's that?
That's the one you're presently working
on, yeah.
But you're not there yet?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we should find about the grant pretty soon. They did a site walk a little while ago, the state did, and I think it's very appealing as far as getting approval for grant, and I think it's a pretty important piece of land, so.
Thanks.
We have a separate land account, and the other money that didn't go through went back into there, but we want to, we basically end up do the accounting and doing everything separate because we got to have a vote to pull it out from you as well as city council, so it's not something I can just spend without, that process, so. The debt did drop down a bit from maturing debt 1.45 down to 1.277. So that was some of the additional money that we have for capital. So it'll probably go up a bit next year because of the loan, the 10.6 million that was, or 11.4 actually, that we got authorized over the past year. So for our balance of the Main Street project. The Meeting House, Gatehouse, the Mare Meadow Pump Station, the Water Street replacement, and the regional roof project was all within that. So we're doing a lot of work. I mean, just not as much as we would hope to do, but. And the last one is departmental equipment and the line item for water system improvement. So. If we did do something in FY26 with that land purchase, that would pop back up in the budget. You'd see it for FY27 in that line item. But for right now, none of that money's been authorized unless I get a vote from the commission as well as city council. So to basically take it out of that account, put it back into there. So, Any questions on any of that?
Any questions? Hey, John, I think we're okay there. What else you got?
So next month, we'll bring that and have an updated capital improvement plan along with the indirect costs that the city charges, so you'll have that. We'll get it to you, well before that meeting. And then we'll be looking at hopefully a vote then, because we're hoping that the city will give us our final numbers and that nothing's changed much from what they told us this time, so. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yep, you're welcome. Yeah, and if you have any questions you think of asking, don't hesitate to email me or give me a call or something. So I know it's a lot to digest. So, even though you had it, still you think of stuff later. So,
John, were you going to report on the water main upgrade?
oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. Spent all my energy on that. As you might have noticed, there's some work going on out here on Main Street. So you can see all the temporary water mains on the side of the roads. They're that large because they also got to supply the fire protection systems. This first phase of the project is all around the Upper Common down to Grove Street, which they anticipate to take probably about another 6 weeks, maybe 2 months to finish, depending on how things go. It's going to be disruptive working around all that. So they've been working this week on getting all the temporary actually connected to the buildings. They couldn't do that until they disinfected all these water lines and then collected bacteria tests to make sure that, that the water was potable. So they've been working on those tie-overs. So we anticipate that next week they'll actually start doing some work. I mean, there's a lot of work been going on, but not much as far as not any water main installation. So like I said, I feel like this will be the most disruptive section until we get to Lower Main Street down by Summer and Lunenburg. But I know for them it gets tougher beyond here in some ways because it gets very tight in some of these sections down here between the buildings, between Putnam and further down particularly. So, but as far as redirecting traffic and impacts on traffic, I think it'll be less as we progress down again until we get to Lower Main Street. So we send out weekly notice to everybody. Our resident engineers are notifying, the contractor's notifying anybody who's going to be impacted by shutdowns and the swap-overs that's temporary. So we try to give them at least 48 hours notice. And, if they have something going on or need to postpone it, we try to work with that schedule. If we need to bring them bottled water, we will, just so they can operate their business while that swap over is going. Having said all that, there's going to be some disruptions because they're finding stuff, even just connecting the service lines, they're finding stuff that's like, what is this or what is that, drilling a pipe just to see, is this thing live or dead or what? It's just so much old piping and utilities in the ground from, who knows, some of it's gas, some of it's, it's just a mess. So, like I said, I would like to think it'd all go perfectly, but when you're dealing with stuff that's 100, 120 years old, some things that might be connected someplace else and we don't even know it. So despite our, our very detailed and well-preserved records. So
When they run into that, John, do they pull out all the old stuff?
No. I mean, we get ties to everything, but they'll cut it out there or whatever, but not chase it any further than that. So
Thank you.
it would be too costly, unfortunately. Like I said, the city has a list of contacts that we send out emails to, business owners and so forth down in downtown, just to let them know what's going on each week. And, even, like I said, door-to-door type notifications or discussions with any property owners, they all know who to contact. So hopefully they can get any issues resolved fairly quickly.
Comment? Yep. I know there's a lot of moving targets and a lot of things going on. But yesterday I was coming up Main Street and the two cars in front of me abruptly stopped because this trench out here that they've filled with sand was probably this deep.
Yeah.
And I know I hit it once too, and I belong to the Fitchburg Bent Ring Club of America. But maybe if you could just ask the contractors, especially on these main areas. Because with everybody locking it up, it kind of gets dangerous.
You know that day that was?
And I get it.
It's not. That's not acceptable. Our resident engineer is supposed to be making sure that it's set at the end of the day. So that's why I was at. Do you know what day it was?
You might even look at it today.
Yeah, I will.
You know, it was, we get rain and stuff,
Yeah.
but it was probably a good 4+ inches down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Nick can attest to the fact that I am pretty hard on the contractor and the engineers. I don't hold back whatsoever. So if I see something, I'll make sure it's corrected. So, and if you see something like right then, don't hesitate to call or email, whatever, and say, hey, this trench isn't,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, Mike.
we can't ourselves keep eyes down here. It's our, we expect the contractor to do the right job, but then we have our resident engineers supposed to be keeping on things, and if they're not doing the job, I will literally fire them off the job. I'm just not going to tolerate that. We will get somebody that's doing it the proper way, so.
Appreciate your attention to detail.
I did. I fired one off the job last year from the engineering firm.
Yeah.
Told him, don't ever have him come back to work in this city again.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't keeping an eye on things properly. We had to do his work, so.
Thanks.
But yeah, anybody sees anything like that, please do not hesitate, because we don't want anybody to have to endure anything like that. We have their emergency lines. We'll get the contractor immediately out there to fix it. And if they don't fix it, we'll go out and fix it with our crews, which I don't have to, because the contractor should be pretty good, better than the one last year, but then we'll charge them for it. So we won't do it for free, of course, they'll pay for that, but they're expected to respond very quickly to any issues that arise. I don't expect them to be able to catch everything, but if there is a problem, the sooner we know we're aware of it, the sooner we can get them out there to correct it, so.
Anything else?
Oh, and, yeah, I keep losing track, sorry. Regional and water and Falulah plant assessments, a draft report I sent out to you. Next month, it was a little too late with the report and be able to meet with Weston Sampson to kind of go over things and put together a presentation. So it will be next month, but at least you have something to look at. I know there's a lot of science to it. I asked them to cut off the appendices because it was like
the
4
90
times
pages.
longer, but they'll kind of give an overview, just, what they found and what needs to be done to meet the regulations, and also make sure that each of the plants continue to provide water for the city. So,
Thank you, John.
and I'm done now, finally.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now, Mark, you're up. Let's see how quick. Wait,
One more question, John. John, how many reservoirs do we have?
I think 13.
13?
Yeah. But
Are all of them working or not?
No, some of them are. We have Overlooks counted as a reservoir. Falulah up at our plant is counted as a reservoir. We never use them and never will use them. They're too small, and they're at an elevation they can't. So we actually have 6 reservoirs that we use for water supply. But we have these others that are just, little.
How many gallons, if you know, you probably, maybe you won't, how many gallons do all 6 of these reservoirs contain?
I'm sure a couple billion gallons. I don't know off the top of my head, I'll be honest. So.
Okay.
But yeah, we have plenty of water, I think I've said it before, whatever. It's like we'd like to sell water, but I'd like to sell water to someone that moves in the city to use a couple 100,000 gallons. We've had another community approach us about buying, 1.5 million gallons a day. We don't have enough really to do that, because we do right now. We could sell it right now, but when you had the drought last fall, guess what? We don't have it, So we'd have to start either cutting off, and they're not going to want to, commit to 30 years for 1.5 million unless they're going to get that 1.5 million every single day, and we really can't commit to that. But like I said, if somebody came into town and needed 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 gallons of water for whatever thing, we could provide them that water. So,
Good. Thank you.
yep.
Okay,
My
Mark
turn.
McNamara, Water Division, Wastewater Division. I'm
Wastewater.
sorry.
The clean water part.
The clean water part, cleaning the water part. But if you can get the high points, because I know we're running.
Yeah, I'm going to go through the CSOs real quick, because it's a real quick review of what's going on right now before you get into the budget. CSO 10, we're at the closing stage of that project. This is the North Main area. They've done some, Polito's started since spring opened us up, and National Water Main's been doing some trenchless sewer CIPP lining in various locations up by Goddard, Maine, Bond, Haskell, and Park Street. Last night and tonight, they're going to be doing some late night nighttime lining from 7 PM to 5 AM. So that's last night, and they should be finishing that tonight. Then after this, there's no more work scheduled for CSO 10 for the rest of the month. And it looks like they're going to probably pave the remaining areas sometime mid-May. And hopefully we can wrap up the CSO 10 project. CSO 32 is the big one that's going on right now. For the month of April, they've been working up in the Elm Street and Academy Street area and doing all the work up there with sewer inverts, new drainage installations, connecting to existing culverts, and bulkhead installations. So that's what's been going on up there. And as they get done that area, they'll start moving east on that. Any questions on our CSO projects before I get into the budget?
Any project questions? Okay, we're good.
8-minute budget review. I'm going to hit the highlights. I wasn't here last month when it was presented, so I don't know what Ken was actually able to talk about, but I can answer any questions you have. And if you have any questions after the meeting, just send them to me and I'll email everybody with the same answer. On page 1, you can see the industrial building for next year is 0. That's the Grief paper mill. You can see the year before, we got $1 million from them. So after they close this summer, we can't expect anything from the industrial building unless someone buys the paper mill and starts opening it up again. The same issue with the liens with John. Fiscal year 25 projected. I actually removed it and I doubled it for next year. So you'll see the 800 increase there.
Can I ask you, if we go back to 2024, your liens were 948.
Yes, we do get more liens than the water department does.
But, so you didn't, but you've shown nothing projected for 2025 and requested 800,000, which is about the normal for.
Right, that's
2000.
guess that we're going to,
But shouldn't that be doubled?
well, I originally had 400.
Oh, you did?
Yep, and I actually removed the 400. So, we budget 400, and then whatever over that, we kind of budget it conservatively, and we usually always get more than that, but you just don't want to overpromise and not deliver.
Okay.
Page 2, the expenses, personnel expenses, just cost of living increases all the way across. I did raise the overtime slightly because we're still having a staffing issue down the east plant. So I had to increase it with just the possibility we don't fill those slots next year. We're hoping to. The rest is just contractual increases that have been factored in. The union that represents the wastewater treatment plant operators is the local 888. They still have one more year to go in their contract, so they don't expire until June of 26. So all these numbers are what they contracted to get. Any questions there?
Questions for Mark? Okay.
Okay, expenses on page 3. Slight increases due to inflation. The chemicals, we increase just a slight amount. It should be noted that all our chemicals, they're flow-based at the treatment plant, and so it depends a lot on what the treatment plant inflow is getting. So right now, we're experiencing a lot of infiltration due to the wet ground and all the snow melt and the rain. So the flow right now is a lot higher than it was last year. So these numbers fluctuate. We did get very hard numbers from the chemical companies. They basically level funded everything. Nothing really increased. You're talking tenths of a penny. So the chemicals themselves didn't rise, but these numbers do change based on how much water is coming into the treatment plant. It should be noted that whatever we don't use, that gets returned back into return earnings, and so when you see what is projected for fiscal year '25, if we don't, that's just what we budgeted for this year. Whatever we don't use gets turned back into retained earnings. Big increase on the architectural engineering, which is, I believe it's the last.
Last line, next to the last line on
Next
page
to the last
3.
line, yeah. Architectural engineering is the area where we have most of our studies done. And it's increased from last year because we have a few projects coming up. CSO, our next project after CSO 45 and 83 is going to be a CSO 4. And so we're trying to prepare for that. And so we have money allocated for CSO 32, which is going on. The one after that is CSO 45 and 83, which is further down Main Street. So we're still doing studies there. And now we're preparing for the next one after those two projects, which is CSO 4. And we do that ahead of time so that we can get all our studies, all the investigations done. So when we go before the SRF, Clean Water Trust, we have all the information they need to give us those low-interest loans that are very good to get. So that's why it's slightly increased because of those upcoming projects that we have.
Question?
Yes.
How many more do we have after
CSO 4,
which is Main Street?
no, 4 is over by Depot Street, I believe.
Okay. Is that one underway?
Not yet. It's getting, after we get done downtown, that's where we're heading next.
Okay, and after that, how many more?
3 or 4, I forget.
So there's still
There's still a
a
couple.
light in the tunnel still.
Yes, but these are the worst ones. The ones that we're looking at right now contribute most of the infiltration out of the treatment plant.
Okay.
And so when these get done, I'm hoping that we see a drastic decrease in the water going down to the treatment plant, which will then decrease our chemical costs and everything else that goes with it. But we won't really know that until we get done CSO 83.
Yes, I think there's 3 total projects, including CSO 4 remaining after the Main Street work. So it'd be CSO 4,
64.
64, and I'm drawing a blank on the last
Yeah, me
one.
too.
Down by Benson Street.
Yep, it's on Benson Street.
Trying
That's
to blank on
last
the
one.
number, though.
Yeah, so we work towards the wastewater treatment plant.
Right, upstream to downstream. So basically, one project every year for the remainder of the consent decree, which expires in 2030. That's our goal, our target date to complete all the requirements.
Yeah. Great. And all these projects that I've just discussed, they have been included with the last sewer rate study that we did in '23. So these all have been accounted for. There's nothing that's unexpected. And so it's not like a big surprise we have to do this now. So it's a strain on the budget. This has all been factored into the sewer rates. Page 4.
Sir?
Oh, go ahead, yes.
Joe, go ahead.
Architectural and engineering, up about 5, is a collection, supply, and repair.
Yep.
It went up 50 grand. I was
Yes.
just wondering, what's that all about?
Okay, the collection, supplies, and repair, that is the line item where we do all the repairs in the sewer main. The collections is the sewers. Now,
Again?
the collections is the sewer lines. You know, they used to be called collections, but they're the sewer division. It went up 75,000 because we had to transfer some of the funds that were in our capital that we used to put in the capital every year, which are the flow meters that go in the pipes, the parts, the meters themselves. Because of the environment they're in, they break down quite often. So so we used to put that in capital, and then we were told that we really shouldn't be doing that. That's not a capital project. Those are just routine repair items for the collections department. So we reduced the capital line, and we just transferred it over here.
On the page before that, you had something in here that I just don't understand, and I know you're going to clear it up for me. What is out of grade?
Out of grade is when we have someone at the wastewater treatment plant who's a lower grade that's working at a higher classification due to a vacancy.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say the chemist is on vacation for a week. One of the senior operators Good work there.
Got it.
Okay.
They don't get the pay, they just get like a small stipend for
They
covering.
get the difference of what they're paid. Sometimes it's only pennies. Okay, page 4, fringe benefits, the first one, I increased it 5%. I just took a wild guess. That's going to be fine-tuned when we get the exact numbers from the auditor's office. So that's the one item that will change between now and the next commission meeting. Maturing debt did go down a little. Taking that as the loans are getting paid off, so we're not paying so much interest in a lot of them. We did get that loan forgiveness letter back in December, so that's helping. And then the last item is capital expenditures. Here you actually see them broken out. We have no vehicles going to be replaced. We're doing very well there. Collection system repair, that's money that if we have a sudden emergency repair in the streets, that's just unexpected. We had a few of them, like, was it last year, the year before, we had the Birchbrook, that burst, and we had to repair that. That was a couple $100,000. So we keep that there as a placeholder just in case there's an emergency.
One above that, John, is the $500,000 more.
Yes, that is for the combined sewer separation CSO 32 SRF ineligible costs. Now, the project is $39.6 million, I think, total. Some of the repair work we do is not SRF eligible. So we have to...
What's SRF?
that is the state revolving fund.
Okay.
That's where we borrow money from at a low interest rate. And so the money they award us, sometimes it doesn't cover some of the issues that have to get done. It doesn't meet their criteria. And so we have to pay for it out of our own city funds.
Understandable. Okay, thank you.
We both apply for those, but sometimes we have luck and sometimes don't. Water has no luck lately. We did for like our tank project, and we got some loan forgiveness on that as well. But so much has been taken up with PFAS issues.
Yep.
They've been funding all of those, so that's basically robbed, per se, the other project that would have been approved in the past. So, because we'd like to get those loans because they're significantly lower interest than what we have to go on the open market. Try to lower the cost as much as possible, but sometimes there's just not enough funding.
Going down, a new one is the sewer siphons. That's the line that goes down into the treatment plant. It accumulates debris, sand, especially after a heavy winter. And so we had to allocate an estimated $100,000 to clean that out. And we're going to probably have to do that every year now because we've been finding out that it's
Is that the
accumulates
thing that
often.
comes around and goes into the sewer and cleans it out like that?
Actually, this, I believe, is a jet, and they suck it out. You're thinking of the clamshell?
Yeah.
No, that's for the catch basins would do that.
That's for the catch basins. And
But this is for the sewer siphons.
Siphons, okay.
Yep.
I'll catch the terminology.
Yeah.
Yes, it takes a
And
while.
Poop siphon.
Someday I'll get it too.
And the last one that's new is the pump station O&M. We haven't had maintenance on them in a while, so we had to include that. And those are our two pump stations the only two pump stations other than the old West plant. So we're lucky we only have two. And
Where are they?
one is Sawyer Passway, and the other one is down off of Airport Road. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Cobbler Drive.
Cobbler Drive, thank you. I'm thinking of Blueberry. Blueberry Cobbler
Blueberry
Drive.
goes into Cobbler, and then it's right there, Blueberry Lane / Cobbler Drive.
Sawyer Passway, you say?
Yes,
Jesus.
over by the train station,
Oh,
down.
It's that road that goes behind the old Harper Furniture Building, Micron's down there.
Yeah.
So you go down to where the bridge is that goes over the river towards that new solar field that Unitil has. Right before you get to that bridge on the left, it's right there.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And so that's my budget in a
You're sticking with it.
Do we have any questions?
now. in a
Questions for
60-minute
Mark?
presentation.
Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, I don't
You're
have any
welcome.
questions for you, Mark.
No, feel free, ask questions all the time. That's how I'm learning, too.
Sure, you grilled me.
That's any other business? Oh, okay, that concludes our agenda, and our next meeting will be, let's see, where is our next meeting? Oh, May 21st at 5 o'clock here.
Last year's indirect costs.
There's no other business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.